Halo is a game that is near and dear to my heart. I watched my dad complete Combat Evolved for the first time in 2002 at about the age of 10. It was the first game that I had completed on my own, and though it was the second I found myself in, Star Wars was thought to be dead until George Lucas sold it to those heartless bastards at Disney.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them! Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness!
Anyways, in the mid-aughts, that meant Halo was the place to be. So many of my lifelong friendships and so much of my free time up until my 20s was centered around Halo. Countless late-night multiplayer sessions and rivers of Mountain Dew intermingled with my childhood drama and adolescent essence to create much of the being you're currently listening to. But things change. After Bungie left Microsoft, 343 Industries went on to create a handful of lackluster experiences. Though they've made what I argue to be one of the best campaigns in the series and one of the best multiplayer experiences in the series, they haven't been able to do it all in one. That's not to mention their top-down shooters or their initial handling of the Master Chief Collection. But, as I said, things change. In 2018, 343 seemed to have realized their mistakes and began actively engaging the community, updating and revitalizing the MCC, and generally seeming like solid folks. 2019 brought Halo Reach to the MCC, the Halo Outpost Discovery, and in 2020, the world ended, but we're just going to gloss over that. During all of this, 343 was cooking up Halo Infinite, and they kept talking to us. Even when they fumbled during E3, they still gave us our sweet baby boy Craig. And they still seemed to hear us and delayed the game until this year. But now things seem different. Halo Infinite's final beta test has been made available, and people have opinions. Now, this isn't unusual for any fandom, but 343 has previously made some rather large promises in regard to the quality and nature of Infinite, and it seems like they may not be delivering them. And before we go any further, I want to make it clear that I have been extremely impressed with the core gameplay loop of Halo Infinite. It's very fun. And I'm also, like I said, very impressed with 343's community communication over the last few years. And I have no doubt that 343 intends to address this with us after the holiday, just like Sketch said on Twitter. However, I'm a neurodivergent English teacher with a webcam and nothing to do over Thanksgiving break, so I will not be waiting until later to address this. Before we really get into the details of Halo Infinite, however, I want to discuss a word that I think is going to be vital to my points further on. That word is corporations. While I may view Halo through the rose-colored glasses of fandom, friendship, and family, it's important to remember that Microsoft, 343, and yes, even Bungie, are corporations. And while we all have an intuitive understanding of what that means, I think it's important to discuss the legal sort of definitions and responsibilities of that. A corporation, defined by Cornell law, is a legal person which has standing to be sued and to sue that is distinct from its stockholders. As Milton Friedman, a PhD of economics and a Nobel laureate, says in an essay of his, which we'll get back to in just a second, a corporation is an artificial person. It's a group of people who have pulled their resources together in pursuit of a larger goal and created this new legal entity to act on their behalf. Now, before we move on, I do want to be clear that I'm discussing specifically for-profit business corporations. This doesn't include nonprofits or charities or anything else that is incorporated for a different purpose. We're only dealing with businesses here. And that brings us to that sure gold I mentioned earlier, and that essay by Milton Friedman. It is entitled, "The Social Responsibility of Businesses to Increase Its Profits." If that and the fact that his name is Milton doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Dr. Friedman, I'll add this other tidbit. In this essay, he uses the word
eleemosynary.
And don't get me wrong, as an English teacher, I love me some big words. But come on, Milt, you could have just said charitable, and you know it. Anyways, in his essay, he basically attacks the idea that corporations have any sort of social responsibility and makes the argument that an executive's first and only duty is to the shareholders and their pocketbooks. And he makes a fairly convincing argument stating,
in a free enterprise private property system, a corporate executive is an employee of the owners of the business. He has direct responsibility to his employers. That responsibility is to conduct the business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible while conforming to the basic rules of the society, both those embodied in law and those embodied in ethical custom.
Now, honestly, that's a pretty fair definition. It addresses financial responsibility, and it also says that corporations should follow law and ethical custom. It gives us on the outside of corporations a fair chance of saying, sure, you're following the law, but you're being a prick and stop it. I don't think you could ask for a more human definition of an artificial person. Here's another passage from Friedman that I think is pretty interesting.
The stockholders or the customers or the employees could separately spend their own money on a particular action if they wished to. The executive is exercising a distinct social responsibility rather than serving as an agent of the stockholders or the customers or the employees, only if he spends the money in a different way than they would have spent it. If he does this, he is in effect imposing taxes on the one hand and deciding how the taxes shall be spent on the other.
Now, this is fascinating for a multitude of reasons, and I highly encourage y'all to read this essay yourselves. But for our purposes, I think the most important reason that Friedman is stating that an executive would not only be violating the trust of his employers and essentially stealing from them, but also the rights of the government and the citizenry. So not only is it bad for the shareholders, but it's also actually bad for society at large. And it's super hard to argue with that thought process. No one wants somebody who's not elected or appointed by the people to start deciding what is or is not best for us, right? Circling back to Halo, this all means that the executives of Microsoft, Xbox Game Studios, and 343 Industries are legally and ethically beholden to the stockholders of Microsoft. And an important part of that fiduciary duty, that responsibility to act in another's financial interests, is the duty of good faith, which according to Cornell law means that they must advance the goals of the corporation, which, as we've made clear, is profit, without breaking the law. The last several minutes has been an extremely long way for me to explain that 343's goal, at the end of the day, is money. And we as a fan community need to keep that in mind, lest we start thinking they owe us something for our nostalgia and the time we spent with their product. Regardless of the promises we feel they have made to us, particularly the Inside Infinite December 2020 post by Joseph Staten, their first duty is to the shareholder. Simple as that. Now, that all being said, the first thing I want to get into is the nature of this beta test. Now, I've been gaming for a long time, and I participated in a number of beta tests, but I wasn't really sure of the actual definition of beta testing, so I used an evil mega corporation search engine to point me to it. And according to Product Plan, which is a company specializing in product management, beta testing is the final round of testing before releasing a product to a wide audience. The objective is to uncover as many bugs or usability issues as possible in a controlled setting. Now, that lined up with my intuitive understanding of what a beta test is, as I'm sure it did with many other gamers. The problem here then becomes this. If this is actually a beta test, is it? 343 announced the Halo Infinite went gold, meaning that a master copy was ready for distribution on November 19th. This was 4 days into this beta. Now, obviously in the age of digital content, updates can be shipped after release, but it seems like a pretty questionable practice to begin distributing a product while it's still in the testing phase. Given that sort of weirdness, we're forced to return to 343's primary goal, profit. Now, it's possible that they were just trying to meet some sort of financial deadline or trying to pad the numbers for shareholders before Christmas season, but I feel like that's a little bit too straightforward. Remember, the second word in beta is test, and I think the reason they released this test and its functioning storefront and credit card machine is to test us, to see what the market would bear in regards to microtransactions. And this becomes a problem when we consider the statements made by 343 in the aforementioned Inside Infinite post. In that post, Ryan Paradis, the design director for the live team on Halo Infinite, stated that their team would maintain a player-first focus. How can that possibly be when you're attempting to use us for guinea pigs? And to answer such questions as what are they willing to pay for, which digital goods are avoided, and how long are they willing to grind before caving and busting out their credit cards. Those are clearly profit-focused questions. And let me tell you that the answer for me to that last one was not long at all. Dr. Russell Barkley, in his mini talks about ADHD, which is his area of expertise, explains that a critical aspect of this disorder is a shortage of dopamine in the brain. And boy, I went into Infinite looking for some of those good neurotransmitters. Luckily, I didn't go too crazy, and I'm a childless millennial with a yearly salary that usually gets blown on sweaters for my rescued pit bull. But he's got enough clothing as is, so I'm not going to end up in the poorhouse. But not everyone is in the same situation as me financially. And not everybody has the tools to manage their impulses and money effectively. And the usual argument to these responses towards microtransactions is have some self-control, or if you don't like them, don't buy them. And fair. And that may seem like a conclusion to the argument, but I don't think that it actually is. In fact, I think it violates the responsibility that an executive has towards the rules of society. It is not, I would argue, within the ethical custom, to use a phrase that Friedman used, of our society to take advantage of people's mental illnesses, disabilities, or other circumstances. It's not. It is well documented that microtransactions do exactly that. And while I don't want to go too in-depth in here about this, there are plenty of other YouTubes that take detailed dives into the cruel science behind them. Now, this all may seem like a digression, but this actually brings me to my second point. The entire issue with microtransactions stems from Halo's transition into a games as a service model. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, and its unfortunate acronym, GAS, Jason Schreier explains it aptly in his article, Top Video Game Companies Won't Stop Talking About Games as a Service.
Developers are looking at ways to make money off games for as long as possible through downloadable content, cosmetic microtransactions, and good old-fashioned loot boxes.
Now, luckily Halo Infinite doesn't have loot boxes as of recording, but this is a fairly good definition. Essentially, game developers are attempting to change video games from a product into a service. Now, the U.S. National Archives defines these terms as such. A product are tangible and discernible items that an organization produces, including digital file-based output, while a service is the production of an essentially intangible benefit, either in its own right or as a significant element of a tangible product, which, through some form of exchange, satisfies an identified need. In layman's terms, a product is a tangible thing that you buy, and a service is a thing that you pay someone to do for you. Now, using those definitions, GAS is an absolute misnomer. The companies adopting this model in free-to-play games have opted to not charge us for the service. There is no subscription fee to access this game, to use their servers, or to do anything. In fact, that's kind of the whole deal. They're free to play. Instead, they're offering us products in the form of tangible digital content. And where is it, dear viewer, that you buy products? If you said store, then you were absolutely correct and deserve a cookie. Feel free to pause the video and go get one. I'll wait.
Cookie time!
So that's the core of my issue with what Halo has become based on this last week and a half of gameplay. They have turned this story, this universe that I love, into a flippin' Walmart. It exists now only to sell me something. The battle pass is there to collect my money once a season. The shop page is obviously for shopping and updates dailies with things that I can't unlock through progression, despite Paradis's promise not to weaponize FOMO against the player. And the final straw was this Fractures Tenrai event. This event released with a really cool trailer, and I would encourage you to watch it, and seemed to offer new armor and potentially some sort of thematic or cinematic gameplay. I didn't really have any expectations on what that might have been, except that it was going to be cool. And I was super disappointed. This event is just Fiesta, an admittedly very fun game mode that's Slayer with random weapons, but one that has been at the core of Halo since the very beginning. 343 essentially cored off a very basic game mode and are reserving it for this event. Additionally, the unique challenges for this event, which are not terribly unique, they're just normal challenges, but for Fiesta specifically, are interspersed throughout our normal weekly challenges, which seem like a decision to encourage us to buy their challenge switches. These allow players to switch out weekly challenges if they don't like them, which makes them an enticing option to get easier challenges and therefore move more quickly through the challenges in order to unlock the limited time armor. Again, not weaponizing FOMO, I guess. This is all in addition to the problems players have with customization. Much like Fiesta, 343 has taken something that's already an integral part of Halo, namely picking 2 colors and an emblem for your character, chopped up the experience, and are selling it back to us piecemeal through microtransactions for shaders and emblems. This just all serves to reinforce the idea that Halo is now a storefront with a game attached. It doesn't feel like I'm playing a game or pursuing a goal anymore. It's no longer a place for me to hang out with my friends and have silly, caffeine-fueled adventures. It feels more akin to going to the mall as a teenager, going to a place of commerce and hoping for once that something exciting happens and slowly realizing that the world is not built for people who are not consuming. So what do? I hear the optimists among you asking, or if you're on the other side of the spectrum, why should we care? Just play the game. I'll address the latter first. That is a perfectly acceptable take, but I think as I've made clear, Halo is more than a game to myself and huge parts of this community. 343 recognizes this, and they are continually trying to engage with us through that lens. They tell us what fans they are of the series and how important it is to their careers and lives, and how they are also players. And given that, I feel it's fair to expect more than a storefront from them. But if you don't have any sort of fandom love for the series and you just want to shoot some folks while wearing default gray armor, totally your prerogative, more power to you. But to those of us who are invested in the game beyond the immediate gameplay, I'm going to suggest the opposite of what you may expect. Instead of refusing to play the game until they fix it, I say keep playing it. But, and this is important, do not buy anything. Now I know, this sounds like the same thing as my imaginary pessimist is saying. Just play the game and shut up. But here's the thing. If they have created a digital store, that means we can have a digital sit-in. Servers cost money. Live services require upkeep. If we keep playing but don't buy anything, eventually they're going to have to address our concerns or explain it to their shareholders. Now, there is a little bit of a snag in that they use the number of active players as a metric of success. So I think it's important to do 2 things. First, we need to keep complaining. Don't listen to the Redditors and faceless internet people who don't want to hear it. Keep submitting posts to Reddit. Keep submitting posts to Halo Waypoint. Submit reviews on Google and Xbox and Steam. Even if there is an initial bump of users, it'll be harder and harder as time goes on for 343 to explain to the suits why there's no money coming in and why all these negative reviews are floating around on the web.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this thing, not join them! Bring balance to the force, not leave it in darkness!
Second, and I think this is important to make clear that we're not just random folks complaining on our own, but a community coming together to express our displeasure. Second, I think it's important that we make it clear that this is not just folks complaining on their own, but a community coming together to express our displeasure. In order to do that, I think we need to adopt a uniform and symbol in order to make our presence known in the game and online. My suggestion is this. Only use cadet armor shaders and default armor from now on. Additionally, I suggest we adopt the number 7 nameplate and emblem, as this can be seen as a reference to the Bungie era fanbase known as the 7th Column, which we could use to demonstrate how important this game has been and continues to be to us. Even if you don't care for my specific plan, I think collective action on the part of us consumers is vitally important. I could talk about the importance of a fan community to us as people. I could talk about the importance of quality stories in society, and I could even talk about the exploitation of the consumer. But because of the bent of this conversation being pretty capitalist, and as we've already discussed, ultimately Microsoft and 343 don't care about anything except their duty to the shareholders. So we need to make sure that that duty lines up with our demands by not providing the expected flow of money and by making it clear that's what we're doing. So that's what we've got. Disappointment in a corporation, that is basically just doing corporation things, and a solution through collective action. Now, I'm going to be out there in my cadet colors and basic armor with the number 7 until things change. y'all can do what you want. If you think my solution is viable, I look forward to seeing you online. Or if you just want to tell me how dumb I am, feel free to leave a comment. If you enjoyed this and you want to hear more of my thoughts or just need someone to talk you to sleep, feel free to hit the likes button and subscribe. Until next time, I'll see y'all online.